Okay, I am gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order. It's December 8th. It is 4:02. I'll do a roll call of planning commission members. Joey Edwards.
Here.
Steve Stevens. Jason Rufo.
Here.
David Yurch.
Here.
And Ryan Hill. Okay, and I don't think we have the commissioners joining us this evening, but I'll, just in case they're online, Commissioner Tharp, Commissioner Lee, Commissioner Bullock. Okay. Any changes to the current agenda? Okay. Do we have any updates?
I think just tomorrow evening's appointed and elected and discussion on the One Community Project starting at 6 o'clock tomorrow evening.
And CMC.
At CMC, hoping to see you all there, so I think that's the only update that I have.
Okay.
And that the winter strategy summit was really a success for you that attended it. I think that we were really happy with the amount of community members that we had turn out for that. We had some great reporting out from our action teams and all of our different topical areas. And so excited about that. But overall, I think it was a real success. And so thank you if you attended. And we were really excited to see on a blustery winter night with so many things competing in our community and happening last week, we were excited to have a good community turnout.
Okay. Okay, I'll move us down into the new business. We have file 25-31, which is the group camp code amendment with the continuation. I don't know if you wanna give a background on that?
Anything to that? No, I think we aren't continuing to a date certain, so we'll have to renotice when that time comes. But we
Okay.
wanted to start with the conversation tonight and go
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah, so just, we're gonna do the group camp code conversation prior to them proposing an amendment to us this evening.
Do you need to make a motion to continue?
If we don't have a date certain, we can't really.
Don't
I
need
think
to.
we're just providing you notice that those files are gonna be continued and that we will renotice them.
They'll all have to be renoticed. Okay, so file 25-19 is the Alpenflow Group Camp and Special Event Facility CUP, also being continued, and we don't have a date certain on that either.
That's correct,
So it'll be renoticed once it comes out.
that's right.
Okay, and just because I do think that we have a big group of people here for one or both of these agenda items. I know that we have our agendas online for people, but where is a place that maybe people can see that some of these change to continuations easily? Like, what's a good place to direct people who are trying to come to some of these and then find out they're continued?
Well, I think tonight so generally this continuation was determined last week, and it really wasn't finalized until Friday. So when the agenda was posted, typically we do keep record of anybody that we're receiving notice from, so we could possibly do a better job of reaching out to anybody that has indicated that they're attending. And if we did receive letters on Friday, I apologize that we didn't let you know sooner. But I think in this particular case, sometimes continuations
It was kind of last minute.
aren't really done with a lot of time to be able to notify, but we can certainly work on that. So it is posted on our website as of Friday.
Okay.
And generally always our agendas are on Friday before our normal regular meetings on Mondays. So that's a great place to check the agenda to see if there's an update, just for information purposes. And then we can also, I know we had another file that had quite a few continuations not long ago. And we were reaching out, we had a long list of people that were really watching and wanting to participate in those hearings. So we were doing a lot of communication with them directly. And so we can work on that a little bit better in the future too.
And to that point, your names again, you said you sent me something.
Mark and Leslie Gray. Janae.
Janae. Okay.
Lindsay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Did I say Leslie?
Lindsay Coons?
Yeah.
So you're particularly interested in Mount Massive, you said? No?
No, they would have been interested in that.
Correct.
Okay. All right, so now I have an email list of 2, so that'll be.
Yeah, we
we've got a little tight-knit community thing going on. We don't talk all the time, but everybody's kind of got each other's number of who knows who over on Half Moon Road and there's not a lot of going on out there. And so I feel like you kind of tell a few of us and we start texting that, the other neighbors that are out there.
Yeah.
We're all a few miles apart, but we're kind of isolated out there, so if you could send a smoke signal to a couple of us, I think we can maybe try and put the word out. We're always waving at each other through the windshield, and I'm always the guy that dropped his blade I live at the very back, and so when I leave in the morning, I'm like, sometimes I plow through the snowdrifts on my way to town and plow snow at 3 AM, so we all kind of see each other, and we know we're out there, so I feel like Mark and I kind of have some people's contacts and
Great.
I mean, just on that particular matter, as far as the website, I have looked on there to try and figure out when some of this stuff was going on, when I got my letter from Sarah and I asked her about it, and she said, go to the county website, it's on there, but it was a little difficult for me to find, but that was when the first meeting was scheduled, so.
Yeah, the agendas should be, I would just like, if you're planning to come to a meeting, just check the agenda a day or two
Okay.
beforehand and just make sure it doesn't show continued, and if so, you can call staff and find out what the deal is with it.
I would also mention that there is another land use application that's pending, kind of in an adjacent area, that's the Mount Massive CUP. That applicant has also asked for some additional time to submit some more information for their application. So I think that that's been noticed for December 22nd, however,
It'll be continued.
it'll be, they want some additional time to review some information that's come forward, so that one won't be happening, but that, on the 22nd, but that's one that's in your neighborhood.
We've heard about that one from the grapevine, kind of through the grapevine as well.
I just wanted to, cause it did show up in the newspaper, so let you know that
Yeah,
that one is
that one-
gonna need some additional time as well.
Okay.
Great.
The CUPs are not on website, correct?
They are on our website.
They are.
We did have to meet our accessibility requirements there was a statewide change, and so we just were approved to get all our, particularly our land use applications. We just received approval to get those back online, and so if you go there, even this evening, you should be able to find all of the information on those applications, they're there.
Thanks, Ann.
You bet.
Okay, I'm gonna move us into file 25-25, which is 3330 Shiloh Backcountry Site Plan Review. And I will start with opening statement here. Thank you guys for trying to come. Lake County Planning Commission will now conduct a public hearing. This statement I'm reading shall be incorporated into and made part of the record on these proceedings. The Planning Commission has jurisdiction to conduct a public hearing on a backcountry site plan review under section 5.2.27.1 of the Lake County Land Development Code. The purpose of this hearing is to consider whether the proposed site plan should be approved. In considering that matter, the commission will address the approval criteria set forth in section 5.2.27.1D of the Lake County Land Development Code. The procedure to be followed in this hearing will be members of the commission will disclose if they have any ex parte communication. 2, county staff will make initial presentation. 3, the applicant may then make their presentation. 4, after that, any other persons either supporting or opposing the application may present their evidence. 5, supporting and opposing witnesses may be questioned by the commission. Once questioning is concluded, no further questioning is permitted unless granted by the chair. 6, the applicant may then present any rebuttal evidence. The parties and witnesses are asked not to submit redundant, irrelevant, or cumulative evidence. If someone has already made the point that you wish to make, please simply say so. The chair will also require that all comments be made to the planning commission and that there be no dialogue between the applicant and the members of the audience. At the conclusion of the evidentiary portion of the hearing, the chair will entertain a motion to close the evidentiary portion of the hearing, and the commission will discuss and weigh the evidence. Then there will be a motion to close the discussion phase of the joint public hearing. The chair of the planning commission will entertain a motion on the application. The motion may take the form of one of the following recommendations. 1, approve the application with no conditions. 2, approve the application with the recommended conditions. 3, approve the application with newly identified conditions, or 4, deny the application. The planning director shall make record of any substantial discussion on the motion and include that in the record with the decision of the commission. Are there any objections to the jurisdiction of the commission or to the form or substance of these proceedings? Hearing none, I will now ask each planning commission member if you've had any ex parte communications to disclose on this file, and if so, to please disclose them now. Joey Edwards.
None.
Jason Marifo,
None.
David Yurch,
None.
and Heather Lind, none. We don't have any new ones on there, I don't
I
think.
don't think so.
Okay, I'll turn it over to staff for initial presentation.
Alright, thank you. Well, I have a presentation. And I know the applicant, Jason Weingast, is also online.
Oh, no, that's commercial, not taking that one.
Alright, so this is a project that is under our backcountry zoning. So that requires a site plan, and the planning commission, you're the final authority on those, just it's been a little while since we've done this, so I wanted to kind of revisit that. So you can go forward. Yeah, the property, it's a mining claim 3330 Shiloh. And it is located on East Tennessee Pass Road and US 102. So the mining claim, you can see the little arrow, is 11.3 acres, and it is, they're proposing a 600 square foot cabin. So it really is very much what we have imagined for and allow in our zoning. So you can go to the next page. So you can see the road that comes up, and then there's this portion that goes through a mining claim a little bit to the south, and then, at least on this image, and then crosses into the Shiloh property. So that's US Forest Service Road 102. Yeah, so they are proposing a location that really has minimal earthwork or tree removal as part of the dirt work that needs to be done. We have no records of any geologic, mining, or environmental hazards as part of this. The lower image is from the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and you can see sort of the designation it gives us. So it's disturbed and lower scoring in terms of habitat. So this isn't an area that is really sensitive in terms of the wildlife impacts. I did receive a letter, and you can go to the next page. Because this page also sort of demonstrates that in the green area is the elk production area. And this site appears to be outside of that. And, but I did receive late in the process an email from CBW that confirmed they want everyone to be aware that the elk don't really just stay within the polygons. That other mapping demonstrates.
Here's my boundary.
So, you know, they are in this area, I'm sure it's part of the value of this area. And so just to be sensitive to that, and so we have added a condition of approval that's probably gonna be pretty typical in our backcountry of just really being good stewards of this area. So while it's not directly a site that perhaps production, they use the word production for calving, occurs, it's an area that's really important to the wildlife, so. There was a variance approved in November for an incinerating toilet. And water will be hauled to the cabin, so there's no running water. So those are we're really looking at off-grid cabins about this size in these locations that have really minimal footprint. So this application really meets those criteria. You can go to the next page. So this is the building design that they're looking at. The finishes are in the image below. So these are both sensitive to the colors and the materials that are in this area, but also they are more they're more wildfire proof in terms of their composition. So there is a picture in your staff report of the exterior lighting that has meets the full cutoff requirements, so we believe the cabin really meets the size and design that we're looking for in this location. So you can go to the next slide. So the conditions of approval for this, that site plan I showed you where we have the 2 mining claims and we got 45 feet in between the two is US Forest Service land. So as you read in the staff report, they have to get a private road, they call it a private road special use permit from the US Forest Service. It's been in process for a while, they're waiting, and it's a condition of getting their structural permit. The importance of, once they've done any site disturbance and they built the cabin, to implement a noxious weed management plan so that the vegetation gets restored appropriately for this location. And there's quite a bit written in the staff report just about what some of the recommendations are from CPW in terms of best practices. So that's the third condition. The fourth and fifth, there's 6 conditions, but have to do with Leadville Lake County Fire Rescue and our Office of Emergency Management. And they have some recommendations for just really how to live, even though they're living there part-time, but safely in this environment. So those are important. And then anything else that gets stated tonight that's important in the approval. So those are the 6 conditions of approval. We are recommending this, we're recommending approval for this based upon these conditions and the findings in the staff report. So I can answer any questions, and again, Jason Weingast is available as well.
Well, let's see if Jason has anything additional he would like to add and or present, and then we can go to questions. Planning Commission?
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for hearing this application today. I really appreciate that. I'm here with my wife, Megan Gilman, my co-applicant for this project. So she's much better at public speaking than I am. So I'm going to send that over to her for any additional comments.
Yeah, I don't know that we have anything specific to add, but happy to answer any questions. This is just essentially a very small part-time use cabin for our family's use. And so, yeah, happy to clarify anything that would be helpful, but we've very much tried to really limit the disturbance on the site with the location of the cabin itself, as well as with the driveway to limit tree removal to just what's necessary for fire mitigation purposes and to get the structure in. But otherwise, we hope to have very, very limited disturbance in the area.
Great, thank you. Planning Commissioner, anybody have any questions?
You know, I always
I know,
have a
that's why I'm
question.
looking at you.
The only thing I couldn't see in the plans was the finished height from the grade. I see it from the finished floor on the main level, 20 feet, but the grade is different from the front to the back. I was just curious if you have that number.
My understanding is that the structure was the 20-foot maximum, not from finished grade for the backcountry use, 600 square foot structure.
Okay, yeah, it just shows 20 feet from the finished floor, which I don't know if that's outside of the,
The ground.
I mean, finished floor is above the joists. So you have the height of the joists up to the top of the structure. I don't know if that's an issue or not, but I don't see it depicted from the top of the foundation or however, if these are on, everything's on posts or whatnot.
We can definitely put that in there. I'm looking at it now to see what you're looking at. Yeah. So that finished grade is from the south side of the cabin, which is the finished grade is at floor level or at ground level. It'll be on the south side. It will be flush with earth, so that you just walk onto it from the south side.
Okay. So from the other side, then you have I don't know what your grading is there, I'm just curious.
Yeah, in the report, it does talk about the grading being minimized for structural concerns by grading the south side to make it less of a slope for the overall building. So it won't be too high. I actually think it's going to be hopefully under 5 feet from beginning to end, north
Okay.
to south.
So from grade level to the top of the structure, we're looking at 25 feet versus really 20 feet. Okay. That's the only question I have.
Usually it would be depicted on here, but just to verify, there's not any fencing or anything like that you guys are doing.
No, and that was in the site plan submittal that there will be no permanent fencing of any kind, only silt fencing during construction for erosion control.
Okay. And then I think that we ended up writing it into the backcountry code anyway, as far as like bear, animal, wildlife management, safety, or trash mainly is what I'm concerned with, but, so I think that's already part of it. Those were the only two things that came to mind for me with the just being a little extra cautious with the CPW stuff, but anybody else have any questions?
Assuming that electricity will be solar? Is that correct? Or generator?
So for now, we decided that we would start with no power, and then only use power. Maybe in the future we can put in power. We do have the capability to put in solar. That can be possible.
Okay, so there's no plan for solar currently, but should solar be used, do you have plans for it, whether it would be building mounted, in other words, roof mounted, or were you considering a freestanding array?
So we thought about that a lot, and what we've designed is a roof that goes directly east and west. The solar access on the site is medium, I would say, but the roof giving us east and west will let us capitalize on the east and west sun because the mountain is generally to the south, so it gives us kind of a good access point. And there definitely is the capability for solar access for year-round energy production.
But we definitely prioritize putting it on the building before
Yes.
putting it on like a post, if we decide to go that direction.
Thank you for that clarification. This is my only question.
Good for me.
Alright, do we have any public comment for this application? Okay, hearing none, I will take a motion to close the public hearing on this application.
I move to close the public portion of this hearing.
Edward seconds.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any discussion before a motion, or does anybody have a motion you'd like to
Any
make?
concerns? Anybody?
I just wanna make sure that it's not an issue setting any kind of precedence so far as the height. If there is, I don't know if it needs to be clarified in that backcountry code so far as the finished height of the,
So
From the
height
foundation
itself
or-
will be reviewed before they get their structure license.
Okay.
And so, that's part of the structure license review. I am a little concerned that I do believe the code does specify that it needs to be, not more than, 20 feet above the finished grade. So that is something that we're earmarking to talk to them about as part of the, structure license. But that's an administrative review, so today is just focused really on the site plan review. But I'm glad that you brought that up, Jason, so that we can take a look at that, or Melissa can take a deeper dive into that with the applicants, and just verify, because I do know that, I think we're relying on the code's definition of height, which is the average,
The
actually,
median
of the
height,
national
yeah, the
current
median
grade prior
grade,
to
not-
construction.
not from
One
Okay.
bigger spot.
It's the median, so the
Is the
middle of
average.
that top.
of the front or the back or
Right,
the
so
high and low
so
spots.
it would be different than the applicant currently understands.
Okay,
So, but that would be part of the structure license, you know,
Understood.
just like with a building permit.
right,
But you did take note of that,
And they did provide us like an image that shows a maximum height of 20 feet. So we'll make sure that that is based upon the average finish grade.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? That was a good point. That was a good catch.
Yeah, I just
And it's
would
hard to
hate
tell off
for,
of the drawings.
to move forward and then someone else says something and it's
That's
not
how it
in
works.
compliance and then something changes and that gets really expensive, so.
Yeah.
Okay, does anybody wanna make a motion?
Edwards moves that the planning commission conditionally approve file number 25-25, 3330 Shiloh Backcountry Site Plan Review pursuant to the standards of section 5.2.27.1 Site Plan Review, and further find that the approval criteria pursuant to the Lake County Land Development Code, section 5.2.27.1D, have been met as evidenced in the staff report dated December 8th, 2025. For file number 25-25, and is conditioned as follows. Number one, a private road special use permit from the U.S. Forest Service is required prior to issuance of the backcountry structure license. Number two, the applicant shall revegetate the disturbed soils, developing a noxious weed plan with the assistance of the Colorado Division of Parks and Wildlife and the Lake County Conservation District. Number three, the applicant shall consider best practices for complying with the CPW recommendations in order to protect important habitat surrounding the property. Number four, applicant shall comply with all recommendations and requirements of the Leadville Lake County Fire Rescue. Number five, applicant shall comply with all recommendations and requirements of the Lake County Office of Emergency Management, including reflective signage, address signage, a reliable communication method, ongoing annual maintenance of defensible space, and access routes to ensure long-term safety. Number six, all statements and representations made by the applicant through the application and hearing shall be binding and considered as conditions of approval. And further finding that, number one, as conditioned, the proposed site plan in its substantial conformance with the express purposes, intents, goals, and policies of the Lake County Comprehensive Plan, and any ancillary county acknowledged or adopted documents pertaining to natural resource protection, affordable housing, infrastructure management, or any area-specific community plans. Number two, as conditioned, the proposed site plan conforms to the requirements and provisions of this code. Number three, as conditioned, the proposed site plan adequately addresses the submittal requirement items. Number four, as conditioned, the proposed site plan is consistent with and in harmony with neighboring land uses and future intended land uses in that area. And number five, as conditioned, any potential man-made natural hazards have or will be adequately mitigated.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Alright, we're gonna move into our study session right on time.
Thanks
We
very
have-
much, one guest.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We have group camp
Thank you
code
very much.
amendment conversation, led by staff.
Okay, so really, I thought this was an ideal time to take a break and really dive in to the potential of this code amendment, what it means, what it's about, and really recognize that commercial lodging as a whole is something that there's an increase in interest on, and that we really probably gonna be coming forward with more recommendations. So this is probably just our first lean in on the topic. And we do anticipate that we're gonna need to have a lot more conversations about this, and potentially some action. So I'll go ahead and start. This is our table of uses that I think most of you are familiar with, and at the top are the zone districts. So the different zone districts, and just took out the excerpt from the code about our commercial lodging, which is held under recreation and entertainment outdoor. Appropriately, as you will see, all of our lodging is only allowed conditionally. We don't have anything up there that is a use by right. It's either prohibited within the zone districts or it is subject to a conditional review. This evening, we're really gonna zone in on group camps and vacation lodges. I wanted to show you the table because I wanted to show how they're grouped together with the same use specific standards. So at the very last column in the table, the 5.2.6, That's the use-specific standards. Those are the standards that we review specifically the use to. And so tonight we're gonna talk about, of course, the group camps and vacation lodges and use-specific standards 5.2.6. And then private resorts and guest ranches, which is fourth down on the list, and it's subject to 5.2.28 standards. Also,
5.2.15.
Oh, 1.5, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
0.15, thank you, Jason. And probably good time to also mention that as we're looking at this, what are the zone districts that group camps and vacation lodges are allowed in conditionally? They're ag, forestry, recreational, resort, and backcountry. Also probably at this point, most of you are familiar enough with our zone districts to know right now we don't have any lands in Lake County that are held under the resort district designation. So specifically, we're gonna really be talking about ag, forestry, recreational, zoning, and backcountry. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So let's talk about definitions. And so they're all generally have some similarities, but specifically group camps are more those informal types of shelters. They can be tents, cabins, huts, or a variation of those type, all temporary lodging meant to accommodate people on vacations. And they give this example of extended visits for educational or athletic purposes, religious retreats, or other purposes. A vacation lodge, again, held under the same use-specific standards, has built structures, something that would be built to a IBC or an IRC code. And they're a group of buildings under single management located nearby recreational opportunities or amenities. And they contain rooms or efficiency units, again, temporary commercial lodging. Then we bump into a different category of private resort and guest ranch. And so private resorts bump up the use to an IBC build, a hotel or a motel, a campus. Same kind of thing as a group camp definition, people vacating. And with the addition on a private resort that customarily these may include the serving of meals. And then when you look up guest camp in our code, it says see private resort. So just wanted us to kind of understand what are the types of uses that we're talking about. So next slide. Then wanted to do a comparison. So generally, the group camps and vacation lodges have the same maximum density, up to 5 people per acre. You can entertain a group camp or vacation lodge on parcels that are a minimum of 5 acres or greater. They have a 50-foot setback and the maximum occupancy is 100 people. Private resorts and guest ranches, same density, but you have to have a minimum of 20 acres. The setback increases to 200 feet and they have a maximum occupancy of 500 people. Next slide. So let's talk about what are the common standards, because verbatim, some of these are absolutely identical between all those different uses. So first,
I'm gonna clarify just one
Sure.
thing for you, because I think what we're saying is that the way our code reads now, they're all separated, they're all separate uses, but they all seem to have the same
correct.
criteria. I
So they
just
have-
wanted to clarify that.
That's right. So when I say the use-specific standards, these are the standards that when we take a use, we go through. Not only do they have to meet the approval criteria for conditional use permit, but there are additional criteria that these uses have to meet. And so we're going through and looking at, for all 4 of these types of uses, what are the common standards that we hold them all to? So the first one is that the use can't compromise the character of the underlying zone district by significantly more intense use of the land or the roads. The next is that the scenic quality of the location has to be preserved. That there won't be significantly more traffic between specifically the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. than the use would normally have during its operation. And that the use shall not create noise in excess of a weighted decibel of 70 for more than one continuous minute between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. This is slightly more restrictive than state statute on noise mitigation. So for commercial use, that decibel level is at 60, but it does, the state allows you to go up 10 to the 70 decibel for up to 15 minutes between the hours of 7 and 7. So our code is a little more restrictive. It says only for no more than a minute, but extends the time frame to allow it to not be as restrictive from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. instead of the 7 to 7.
And is that at the property line?
Yes, yes, at the property line. And there's other things that get considered, like the ambient sound around, so what's kind of already existing. A lot of these areas though are vacant, but some have noise contributors surrounding them.
Okay.
So, next slide. So all roads and sidewalks, paths, bicycle paths, they all have to comply with the zoning code, or the land development code, and our roadway standards and construction standards. So they all have to do that. If there's gas and electric service, they have to meet the local and state regulations. And if they're going to install utilities, they have to be underground. If there are service buildings and restrooms, they have to meet CDPHE requirements. At least 60% of the natural landscape and existing vegetation has to be preserved. The trash container has to be in wildlife friendly and secure structures or collection areas. And then, as you'll find in our code a lot, no fireworks. So next slide. The variations we've already talked about. Between all of those uses, there's a greater setback for private resorts and guest ranches of that 200 feet versus the 50 feet. The minimum lot size to be able to do these uses, there's the variation between the 5 and 20 that we just saw on the table. But the maximum occupancy, this is something that's a little different for each of those. And that group camps under the code say they can allow up to 100 people. But after that, of full or part-time residents, they should then be considered as private resorts or guest ranches. And the private resorts say maximum occupancy is 500 people, and then after that, they will be considered through a PUD process. So now we're gonna kind of talk about what we think as the planning department, what are the deficiencies in this? Next slide. So we believe that an assumption that any use is appropriate to a maximum occupancy without really looking at the adequate site-specific review is very short-sighted and probably isn't being a good steward of the land relative to the underlying zone district. The first finding, or the first criteria, the first standard that we talked about. And so we also see that there are large differences between our zoning districts. Between ag, forestry, recreation, backcountry, and resort. And what is the district intent? If you're going to cite a group camp, relatively, we've seen group camps in both backcountry, ag, forestry, and recreation. But backcountry, like item B, has difficulties with accessibility. So assuming, I would say this, a code comes in with an applicant kind of assuming with a group camp, I can automatically be at least 100 people. So I think there's large assumptions about what is an appropriate max occupancy and max density. And that could be widely different between zone districts of what is appropriate in all of those different areas. It really doesn't speak to how accessible these areas are. We don't think those standards that we just went through, it just said if you have these roads, they have to be built to standards. But how accessible is the site? And what are the neighboring land uses? So what is going to be the degree of impact to areas? What's going to be the degree of traffic, noise, lighting, light pollution? What is that going to be? And so those standards that we went through, it says, yes, the underlying zone district, but have we gotten specific enough in our code to set good expectations, both in the review of it and also for the applicant? And then as we know, all sites are not equal. And so environmental sensitivities, floodplains, floodways, wetlands, excessive slopes being like 30% or 16 degrees of slope. That's what we would think of it as excessive or even potentially close to that. Alpine tundra, view sheds, and then also considering the wildlife impacts. As Melissa just pointed out in our last review for a strictly temporary occupied structure, we're really starting to want to lean in and identify, are we jeopardizing our critical habitats? And what does that mean? And then hazards and safety. We need to be considering wildfire, mining hazards, avalanche. Those are just a few areas of concern. Is there adequate utilities? What does sanitation and water look like in all of these different varying degrees of sites? And is there adequate emergency planning and evacuation? If we're gonna have these types of uses, have we actually planned in the code to review them on a well-vetted basis? So this just kind of gives you an overall idea of what's been driving our planning discussions, and are we adequately reviewing these with enough information and detail instead of just assuming that 5 people per acre is the correct density and that 100 or 500 or whatever the maximum is that accurate, or could we do a better job of vetting these and reviewing these on a site-specific review basis? So, next slide. I'm going to discuss a little bit about, and I do want to know, I'm giving you so much, this is a big data dump, and so I promise you we're going to get to a point that we're going to be asking for feedback. We can go back through the slides and pull things out if you'd like. But right now we're going to talk about what will we need to look at in order to pass a code amendment. We're really leaning into our criteria. And so what does our comprehensive plan say? Our comprehensive plan has strategies around economic growth element and what are those goals and strategies that have been identified. And really it says that we should better understand our business base and identify the resources they need to thrive. So these 4 goals all talk about kind of the why. Why are we taking a look at this? And why is this important for us to sort this out and do it right? Because this is a strategy and goal that's been identified in a comprehensive plan. And so those goals have been at targeting and recruiting businesses and organizations that can capitalize on the high elevation geography and public lands, that we want to look at increasing and sustaining our overnight visitation and increase awareness of the Little Lake County as a destination. We want to increase the shoulder season visitation, and then we want to extend those lengths of stay and encourage repeat visitation, that by guiding them through the experiences that they can have here, both recreationally and heritage-based experiences, and become a destination for that. So that's one of the reasons that we feel this is really important and that we have taken the time to lean in on this. So next slide. And are there changing social values, social and economic current local conditions, or new planning concepts that are really driving this work as well? And so the industry is changing. Commercial lodging doesn't look the same as these uses probably haven't been touched in, 20 plus years. And so things are looking different. The industry's changing. There's new types of structures out there. There's new types of incinerating and composting toilets. There's new dome structures. There's new tiny home structures. There's so many different new types of commercial lodging that our code doesn't really anticipate or even really think about. And experiences, commercial lodging and being able to get out and interface with our natural assets is a really important thing that the comp plan says that we should be focusing on to increase our overall economic development. We know that there is a shortage of managed year-round commercial lodging options. Another way that that's happening is some of our traditional lodging has been repurposed into workforce housing. Just last year, we passed the the rezoning and repurposing of the Silver King into workforce housing. So some of our traditional lodging options have been lost. We know that we all have seen the effects of dispersed camping in our community, and we know that that is a really strained resource, and that we need to look at ways that we can manage that better. And then also, I think we all probably know that our campgrounds are generally booking out 6 months in advance, that we don't have a lot of privately owned commercial lodging that gives like a group experience for larger groups. The group camps, I think the largest group camp that I can think that has been approved in Lake County was for 48 people, the Climax Revival. And other than that, I think that most of our group camps, top off at around 8 to 12. So we definitely see that there are social and economic conditions that are suggesting that we need to consider whether or not our code really responds to that, and if we potentially need to look at things a little differently. And then the last criteria in considering a code amendment is, are we promoting the public health, safety, and general welfare of our community? And so with the standards that I read to you earlier, we just don't think that they are really adequate or site-specific enough to even determine what maximum occupancy should be. And that actually maximum occupancy should be a site-specific review, very intentional and place-based, instead of just giving this blanket, these are the maximums within the code. Let's take a look at this. We're suggesting taking a look at it more on a site-specific basis. So now let's look at what were some draft proposals. Here's some new standards, and we want to get your thoughts on this. So replacing that max occupancy statement and that 5 person per acre standard to such uses require a minimum of 5 acres of land area, but allowable occupancy shall be determined through the conditional review process based upon the degree of impact relative to the surrounding area and shall not exceed 5 people per acre. In order to consider the maximum allowable density, careful consideration will be given to the degree of impact to the underlying zone district and neighboring uses, along with adherence to all of the use-specific standards contained herein. So instead of just putting blanket numbers out there, we're saying let's break this down and let's look at those areas. Maybe some areas make sense to have a higher degree of use, as long as we're not making the density higher. So we're saying, hey, the 5 people per acre, that sounds reasonable, but let's not start saying at over 100 you become brick and mortar, because maybe a group camp has a lighter touch on the land than a brick and mortar structure might have. So does it make sense to maybe take this and look at it more like, what can this specific site sustain, and what is the proposal in front of you to determine what those maximum occupancy loads should be? Then require an additional setback of 200 feet for parcels that are 20 acres or greater. That's just creating an additional buffer. That's kind of marrying the two uses together and not having this kind of offset. Let's just bring it together. Require adequately maintained year-round access for an acceptable secondary means of emergency egress for parcels proposing 50 or more occupants. This is something we really spent a lot of time trying to think about. And so what this would mean is that a lot of these uses might locate on mining claims, and those are traditionally 10.33 acres. So if you're gonna start saying we want 50 people on a mining claim, does it have year-round access? Does it have an acceptable secondary means of egress? Is that a better way? Because our code is really silent right now about how do we get people in and out? How do we make sure that they're gonna be safe if we've got larger groups on there? So this kind of speaks to the, well, if we go a little higher in that, or you could come at it from maybe all of these uses that bad country can go up this high. That's another possibility, that's what's in parentheses. But this is really meant to say, as we increase the degree of occupants, we need to make sure that we have adequate access for emergency evacuation. The next one is uses shall not be located in environmentally sensitive areas, included but not limited to examples of floodplain, wetlands, areas of extreme slope that we already talked about, and alpine tundra. You know, obviously these are areas that have risks or that we need to be good stewards of. Next slide. At least 60% of the natural landscape and existing vegetation on the subject property must be preserved. You saw that before, but now we're gonna say exception is given for mitigating wildfire risk through appropriate mitigation measures. Specifically, it might be necessary and appropriate for property owners to conduct selective felling and or thinning of trees and brush on their property to decrease the potential of wildfire. Arbitrary or extensive cutting of trees for purposes other than protecting and sustaining forest health or mitigating wildfire risk shall be prohibited. And consultation with a fire professional is advised to help determine tree and field risks. So, you know, this is a way that, yes, we want to preserve the natural environment, but we're also, as we're looking to adopt our wildfire resiliency code, promote the goals and strategies within our wildfire mitigation planning, that we also want to be very cognizant of creating uses that are also aligning with that. This might look really familiar because this is a standard in backcountry, so we're applying it to group camp. So again, being really consistent in our code, you're gonna start seeing some consistencies here. The last condition and this condition are ones that you're gonna find in other environmentally sensitive areas. Number 6 is recycling is encouraged for all uses, but for any use proposing 100 or more occupants, a recycling plan is required. Again, good stewardship and making sure that waste is properly mitigated. Number 7, uses shall demonstrate adequate facilities for sanitary waste, potable water, gray water management, and solid waste refuse as approved by state and local Department of Public Health. So that can mean a lot of different things in a lot of different places, but we want to make sure that whatever the outcome of that is, whether it's vault privies, whether it's wells, whether it's a CDPHE water system, whatever it is, that we are making sure we've got adequate facilities in all of these different zone districts to adequately take care of the use. That's again, something the code has been pretty silent on. Next slide. Okay, our last two, we're almost there. Number 8, parcels or areas subject to geologic hazards shall not be developed for any use that might endanger health and safety, life, or property unless the hazard can be eliminated or mitigated in a manner acceptable to the county. Geologic hazards include but are not limited to avalanches, landslides, rock falls, flood flows, unstable slopes or soils, ground subsidence, radioactivity, or other environmental hazards such as prospect pits, adits, stopes, shafts, or other hazards due to historic mining. Again, you might have seen, remember this, it's other places in the code, specifically backcountry review. And then number 9, additional review. At the discretion of the director, any structure and site plan may be referred to other state and local agencies, including but not limited to Public Works, Leadville Lake County Fire Rescue, and/or Environmental Health. Additional agency review may be needed to address environmentally sensitive areas, included but not limited to wildland-urban interface, wetland and geologic hazards, critical fish and wildlife habitat, and alpine tundra. So a little bit of redundancy, but what this number 9 says is we may have to call on other agencies to just help us figure out how to manage those areas. But so what we have done is shift from saying group camps are 100 people and resort and guest ranches or camps and vacation lodges are 100 people. Then suddenly, without even really any call other than how many occupants you have, you're suddenly a different use that's brick and mortar. So what we're suggesting is that determining the actual occupancy, maximum occupancy load should be really vetted through this review and not determined by your use. More of a site-specific review looking at what are the sensitivities, what are the hazards, and what are the impacts. And so that's the basis of the code amendment. We'll go to the next 5. So really excited to hear your feedback and questions. And why you probably know now that we thought it'd be really good to unpack this in a work session instead of trying to bring this for your final decision. We really want to make sure that this feels like something you've had time to think about it and let it sit with you. And so that's why we haven't set the exact hearing yet, because as we started unpacking this, staff really identified this is a pretty heavy lift. And the other part of this is that the commercial lodging conversation we don't feel is over. We also feel like we really do need to look at backcountry. And, we allowed group camps in backcountry. Do we need to maybe create a backcountry camp that is different than a group camp? Do we need to look at campgrounds? Do our campgrounds really match up with what's happening? There are other communities that have looked at the CDPHE regulations and considered there's a lot of different types of campgrounds, from primitive to semi-primitive to semi-developed to modern to developed. So there are a lot of different types, and a lot of different communities are doing a lot of different things. So we're saying this is what we kind of think might be some low-hanging fruit. We're not looking to make the code more permissive. We're trying to make it stronger and better. And we do think there's a lot more work to be done. So in January, we're gonna come back with more, but this is our first step into this conversation.
Yeah, I think that was gonna be my initial statement, is just that I find it annoying that we have 4 different names for things and really just the same rules for all 4 things, and they all just kind of blend together, and that doesn't make any sense to me, and I think it's always been a hassle. I can think of from the beginning of like trying to decide who fits into what, and at the end of the day, it kind of doesn't matter because yeah, and it doesn't make any sense, and I do think that some of what we have can be morphed or eliminated and replaced with something else. Yeah, I don't, the 4 don't necessarily make sense for what we have in current day. And I just, I only know of a couple of applications we have coming up here, but like there's a handful of other ones I've talked to people about in the past, like people's ideas that they have for up here that I've never even thought of, that I think tightening this down in really understanding what we want now, and I think that's part of what we're doing with the One Community project too, is just kind of getting an understanding of what the community wants us to be, how we wanna approach things like this, and then unfortunately, we have to just kind of piecemeal the land development code to match what we want, and so I appreciate that this is step 1, but my opinion is that it is a really big, much bigger, like if we moved forward, the occupancy thing in my opinion, makes total sense, because like right now, if we really have it listed that way, somebody can apply for a group camp in the backcountry, and if they have 100 acres in the backcountry, they can apply and assume that they're gonna be allowed to have 500 people. That's crazy, with no great road access. So I feel like we want, and the thing is yes, can we deny that conditional use permit? Sure, but it's just the process that people have to go through. I'd rather them be upfront in our code, be like, you can do it here, but you can't do it here. Like, let's just be clear about it to start. So I think my opinion is your proposed changes make a lot of sense to me, especially the verbiage of site-specific density, because I don't like the max thing. That just is implied that you can do it unless you have something wrong. But only with the caveat that I think it is super important that we address the other definitions next, like what are our definitions and what should they be and what are the standards underneath them, which I know is gonna be a heavy lift, hopefully not as big as backcountry, but I think it is a heavy lift. But it seems like it's a big one that needs to probably happen if that's the way it is.
So this process, I like what you're doing, and I like setting the high end as a limit. Would it start with a site plan and then an actual site visit by CPD? That's really how you'd have to measure this now, because just having a rendering and a description on paper doesn't give you the real idea of what a parcel of land is capable of. Does that make sense? Is it,
Right, well, and the burden would be on the applicant too, to provide a site-specific inventory of what are the encumbrances on the property, what are the, potentially that can be done from various degrees, from surveys up to geotech analysis. So just really, like if there was a basis for needing a more complex study of hazard that would be identified or whatever it is. If we need wetlands delineated or if we need floodplain verified, so there may be additional services and
and that's where
expert
you'd call in the
information.
other, but we're really relying on the applicant to provide that initial information.
And we try to get boots on the ground on sites on a regular basis too. So, typically when we have, particularly for conditional use permit, and we're starting to talk about developing a site, tonight we heard about probably the most minimal impact in the backcountry with the application you heard tonight, up to, these commercial uses that yes, site plans are really essential by staff. And then taking every site specific, what are the attributes and what do we need to dive into?
Well, and just looking at tonight's hearing, that one road access is a very minimal access. And having more than one family back there in an emergency and not having a secondary escape route is,
Be a completely
Is
different
a-
conversation, right?
yeah. So that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm waiting, I know, you've got them coming
So the only-
forward,
It's gonna be about
Well-
lighting, isn't it?
Lighting.
No, it's not. I mean, we can go down that road too, but the setbacks, it said an additional 200 feet in the proposed.
Oh, so I think what I meant is 200 feet, so if I said
Okay.
additional, good,
Okay, so that part of it, so I was just thinking if you have a 10-acre piece of land and 80% of it is up the side of a hill and you have a 200-foot setback, are you ineffectively potentially not allowing anything on that piece of land? Or could there be an exception made to say, you have 10 acres, so the setback's 200 feet, but you really only have 250 feet of usable space before you're up a slope. So are they still gonna have to meet that requirement?
two things, one, the 200-foot setback doesn't hit until 20 acres. And
Or, okay, yeah,
so 20 acres, and then the other is, there's variances, there are
Okay.
variances.
Somebody has a special circumstance,
someone-
they apply for
Right.
it.
cause then you would effectively,
And that would be one of the basis
Okay.
for, one of the criteria or considerations for a variance. So-
And that's exactly what we're talking about here. If somebody has a 20-acre parcel, but
and only an
16 of
acre,
those
yeah, or
acres are
whatever,
completely unusable, then it does change your overall use.
Right.
occupancy,
Right,
all of
right.
that,
So
so,
that's exactly what this would address.
okay, that's what, I just wanna make sure I'm
Absolutely, so
understanding that.
obviously
Okay.
that's an area that you're gonna avoid, but your setback is around the whole perimeter of your parcel.
Okay.
And so, if it would create, decrease to the degree that your usable space, maybe that doesn't, variance, maybe that actually means that your occupancy of those will be contributing factors, like Joey was saying, that, in this instance, it makes a lot more sense, you only really, let's dial it down to, there's 6 acres that are actually more usable, and if we apply the 5 person per acre, or, maybe
Right.
access, or whatever it is, so, but you'll be able to, on a case by case, have that consideration instead of this assumption in the code that is just automatic. And maybe there's sites that it makes a whole lot of sense to have beyond 100, but pushing it into brick and mortar doesn't make sense, right? Like,
Got
is
it.
that that's a heavier touch on the land than potentially maybe this informal structure kind of approach or some
Yeah,
membrane structures or something.
yeah, and I think to further that, it is really important because if you can create a site, or if you do have a site that half of it's not usable, and you're applying that big of density in 3 acres instead of the
Right.
other 40 acres, and you suddenly have 100 people on 4 acres, you're like, this is a totally different impact in
Right.
this corner, and what's there, what's emergency access, like, I do think that we have to identify, I just think there are so many different ways people are doing these kind of like lodging, I'm just gonna call them lodging establishments, cause it's anything from camping to tiny homes to yurts to whatever, and it's just like, there's so many different ways you could say, like, I don't care if they can drive to it because they hike up to the huts. But then we're gonna have different standards for you to make sure it's safe, you know? So I just feel like that's where we really have to dive into the rest of the definitions of this, because I think that density is a very big, probably the most important thing right away to take care of, is like make that site specific. But then I think beyond that, there's all these other pieces too, that's like, you can have somebody who has a really great plan over here that doesn't meet our current standards, and one over here that does and is terrible application, so.
There's still a cap on density of 5 people per acre unless there was a variance involved.
Right, and then the 5 people per acre is,
It's across the
we do
board.
think that has a lot of merit to it, so we
So
get it.
you have a 20 acre parcel, only 8 acres are available, your density's based on that 8 acres, not.
No, it's based on the parcel size.
It's based on the parcel size,
That's
as the
why
code
it's
stands
important
today,
for us to
That's
be
where,
able to
right, that's
mitigate
where this
it.
changes,
Mhm.
right.
right, as it stands today, the 5 people per acre is
No, I
just
understand,
based on
that's, the
size.
proposal would address that, where our current code does not.
So is there a threshold of that density?
It still would max out at that.
Right, but in respect to any kind of emergency services, cause in the backcountry, you're saying you're kind of omitting.
So our CUP guidelines still say it has to meet all of these other criteria in order for us to approve the CUP. So they still would have to demonstrate everything else that we have in there, safety, emergency access, things like that, to get the conditional use permit approved. It's just that density right now would be a harder one to rein in on, because it's harder to have that conversation of what are you basing that off of? And now it's in the code, or
Okay.
it could be in the code to,
I'm just saying, if you have somewhere where you're gonna have 100 people, but then you don't have adequate access, are you still allowing 100 people?
well, I think that
or
individual
less?
application, that's
Would
why
have
it would
to-
go.
Okay,
So that's why we're switching, the idea would be to
Got
switch the
okay.
density to be site specific, because we're not gonna let you have 100 people if you don't have good access.
right.
So that allows us to make the change as part of the CUP hearing.
Which is something that we've been doing on previous CUPs, I don't think it's ever where we've
Okay.
limited occupancy or limited density just because of access.
Okay,
The only thing that, what I think it's so nice when our code really articulates for an applicant. It does, the last thing, and I think what our code, we're seeing where there needs to be incremental changes, because sometimes I feel that applicants are feeling like it's a moving target. What is staff asking of us, and why are you asking this, but where does that say it in the code, and how does that go? So I think the more that we can articulate exactly what are the review standards that you're gonna be held to, and it's in the code, it's so much easier for them to navigate. It's easier for staff to navigate.
right.
It's easier to have good, clear expectations for applicants, and so then we aren't struggling as staff, applicants aren't getting discouraged by our process too. And so, we really wanna have a code that really speaks to, what to expect through the process. And sometimes I think we potentially have heard that it feels like sometimes that's a moving target when they're working with staff, and that's the last thing we want it to be.
So does the definitions of the different terms that you had in the first couple of slides, does that lend itself to gray areas?
Sure it
Other
does.
in the code, that those really need to be matched somehow?
Yeah, I think that's where I'm going with it, is like, I think that's next step after this
Okay.
change would be, I think we need to go back and look at those 4 categories and be like, are those real? Are the definitions real? Are they what we want them to be? Do we need to replace them with something else? Do we need to
Or
add
consolidate
anything
them,
or
yeah.
consolidate them, whatever it is, and fix those, because it doesn't make these, I could mix vacation lodge and private resort in the same thing in my brain. And then you can also, but then at the end of the day, the way we have it currently in the code is it doesn't really actually matter which one of these you are, because you meet the same standards.
Right.
So like, that doesn't make any sense. So I think I think the next step would be to identify these and find which ones we wanna keep, which ones we wanna morph and
Right.
create different.
The conditions that you wanna modify are, they look good, I don't see a single one that I disagree with.
I like the verbiage.
Yeah, like, I mean, group camp, it says a group of visitors live temporarily.
Mhm.
How is that different from a private resort that has a hotel or motel or campus? Those are still
Yeah.
living temporarily, right? Like,
Yeah, so this would be our next,
okay, alright.
our next goal, but right
So I think that
now,
part's pretty confusing, like you said, where
yeah,
it's
we need to
different,
fix
but
the whole
doesn't
lodging,
really
commercial
matter.
lodging section of our code and make sure it's anticipating and has room for things we aren't anticipating, but yeah, this
And
doesn't make any
differentiate the
sense.
zone districts.
Yeah, and differentiate the zone districts, which is really important also.
But the criteria that you're coming up with seem to be spot on. I don't
Yeah,
see
as far as the
a problem with that.
first change about occupancy or density, I think that is.
Your 9 points are great.
Great. Some of them are they're coming from backcountry review, they're coming from special event venue. That's how we deal with density at special event venues or facilities. So it's keeping everything that we incorporated in there, you can find consistency with how we vet other uses too. So didn't reinvent the wheel, there's some verbiage that is a little more specific, like the accessibility, like the recycling, the recycling is something I'd like to see throughout the code in different places. But generally, what we're trying to do is also kind of, level the bar, between them all. So that, they're all, we're having that kind of environmental and intentional placemaking throughout our code. And as far as impacts too, so.
Yeah, this is a good start, we just need to work on some definitions of specifically what we're talking about first and last.
After the first of the year, I think that we've got, we do see this whole scope of work being very, very big. And so we'll be coming back with a recommendation of how we could address that. We've got some ideas, so we'll be coming back.
What do you think about utilities in this?
About which part?
Like
the-
water and water
They're
and
in it
sewer.
on, it's like condition
go
8
back
or
to
9 or
the-
something.
So what's the question about utilities?
Yeah, we making,
So, keep going. Next one. Uses shall demonstrate adequate facilities for sanitary waste, potable water, gray water management, solid waste, refuse, as approved by the state and local department of public health. So what we wanna do, what my thought in creating and crafting this is that can be a variety of different outcomes, based on our local regulations or state regulations. So I would say whatever the use lands on, it has to be something that the state and local public health regulations can support.
Shelby, would you mind opening the Zoom thing just for me? Cause I thought I saw 2 of our commissioners, I just didn't know if Matt or Elsa, you had anything that you wanted to add as far as staff pursuing this potential code amendment for us?
Let's see, I can just say, yeah, clarity. If I was someone that wanted to pursue something like this, it'd be nice to have clarity. And so when it's site specific, I don't know if that grays it a little bit or how that could be addressed, but I'm just putting myself in the shoes of someone who may want to do this, or maybe looking at buying a parcel and trying to explore it. So, I like what was said about, trying to make it clear, like a clear path with clear instructions, and, trying to make it easy for people to see if it's possible or impossible, so they don't go down a road that's impossible.
Sure.
That's all I got.
do you feel like the language that was drafted for, I mean, it does make it site specific, so, which technically it always was as a conditional use permit, but this just, I think the idea was that the additional language now helps, say what we're gonna point to in determining what that density can be, so hopefully that gives them the avenue. Do you feel like that was clear? Do you feel like that needs more?
I would need to study it a little bit more and see, and again, put myself in the position of if I wanted to do something like this, does this all make sense? Is it relatively easy to assess? And there's a lot of information here, so I really can't say right now.
Yeah, no, that's fine, that's good.
And it seems like a ton of work you guys put into it, so. But I'm all for it. I mean, this stuff is going to get more and more popular. The more crowded this place gets, so.
Yep.
And Matt, I'm happy to send over the slide deck. I will be preparing a staff report too, but I'm happy to just share that slide deck with everybody so that you can take a little more time with it. Because it is a lot, like I said, it's a lot. It was a big data dump on you, or information dump. And so I totally appreciate it. You might want it to sit with you for a little bit before you've got more feedback on it, so. But I appreciate first look.
Just a quick process question. Would this come to the Board of Review as well for amendment into the code, or would
No,
this?
It would be a public hearing with, a joint public hearing with the planning commission and the commissioners, and then approval through you. But it is a public process, so can be communicated with the public during that process as well, so.
Yeah, this is a legislative process, Matt, and it will amend the land development code, but we will be looking for public input on it as well. So we'll have that on our website for anybody that is online and anybody that is in the audience that would like to provide feedback on this. Please get with us, please send us your information. In fact, it probably would be good to put something on our website that just specifically asks for feedback on this particular code amendment. So we'll add that to our website, and we should have that up and running by the end of the week or next week. So just for anybody that's here from the public that would like to provide and give us feedback on what you've heard tonight.
You've got 9 potential conditions. Do we wanna add one more just for potential traffic or access or adjacent parking or anything like that? Is that something that we want to address in this process?
Parking, we could look at crafting something that talks about adequate I think parking is when you're talking about
If you have 100 people, that's
or
several
more
vehicles.
than that, so I think parking is absolutely something that should be part of the discussion. I think that's great.
And at some point, at some size, whether it's the smaller or the larger one, we would wanna look at traffic impacts.
And I will mention that this will also, so if a building, so our code says if you're going to be any of your developer that requires a building permit, then you do have to go through the site plan review with the planning commission. And that's when we're gonna look at specifically spatial kind of things like parking and snow management and
Sure.
so all of the actual operations on the site. So we don't do those administratively. Anything that's commercial has to go through the site plan and a public hearing process. So they're just thought of it,
So
that
they would
parking
be
would be
addressed.
part of that site plan review.
Thank you.
I wanna give Elsa, I think she was gonna give us a little bit of feedback too.
Oh, thanks so much, Heather. Yeah, I think I'm very much a fan of this. Anything that can clean up code that makes it easier for staff and potential land users or developers to navigate the system, I think is a huge benefit. So I think that, I guess what I would ask for is a little bit of an audit about all of the places where our code needs to be cleaned up that could streamline things for staff and potential clients so that we could really have a sense of like what the priorities are, or so we could actually direct where we think the priorities are. I don't want us to be like directing staff time just based on what's coming up at the moment, but instead being able to look at it holistically and then inform priorities a little better. So I guess that's kind of a yes and answer.
Yes.
So
I'm hoping that the comp plan in the One Community Project is going to help us identify our priorities first. But I will say that we've been talking about how great and it would be to be able to redo the land development code or get a full audit of the land development code, but it's so big and there's so many pieces to it, I mean, it would be a huge cost and way bigger than the comp plan review process, I think, so that's why it hasn't been done over the years. I think it's like something that we have piecemealed at least as long as I've been involved. Unfortunately, I don't disagree that it would be really nice to figure out how to get the funding and resources to do that at one point, but I do think that the outcome of the One Community Project with the comprehensive plan is gonna be a huge, huge start this year. I think that even from our last comp plan, I think this one will be exponentially better at identifying things that we need to review in our code to see what needs addressed sooner rather than later, to help us on that, but that's kind of been our issue.
No, I agree, Heather. I guess what I also want to inform the process though is like from staff, we've invested in more administrative support for our department heads. So like being able to work with our county deputy to be able to talk with staff and look at it more holistically to see from their point of view, not just through the comp plan or the One Community Project, like yes, I'm hoping the One Community Project will do a lot, but I don't think it's going to do everything. And it needs to be informed through a staff process, not just what the community sees as the holdups. So that's, I guess, what I'm referring to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
This is a baby step, but it's exactly the same thing. It's trying to clean up code and make it an easier thing to navigate. So it's a small start, but it's a start.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that the planning department consistently has a parking lot of areas that we identify that there's things that are either deficient or there have been changes that need to be addressed. And so we are keeping, kind of a running list of those. And at the beginning of every year, we typically meet with the planning commission and talk about, what are those kind of things. And in the board, the planning commission and the board of planning commissioners to identify, where are some of those areas of the code that need incremental updates or changes based on just what our needs of our community are or deficiencies in the code. So we do try to do some strategic planning at the beginning of every year to kind of really take a look at that, to kind of set priorities. So I really appreciate what you were saying, Elsa, because I absolutely agree with it, and what and Heather, because there is work, but we did choose at the end of our last comprehensive plan to do incremental changes. We did get a bid at that time from RPI, and I think even back then it was to the tune of like $150,000, which was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So it isn't something to probably take lightly cost-wise, but I totally agree and really appreciate both the board's support and the planning commission's support in looking at ways that we can strengthen our development code. Thank you.
For all of our public that is here and online, thank you for attending tonight. Because this part of the conversation was a work session with us, it's not really a place where we can take in public comment on this application, on this, because it's not the application public hearing portion. But we would love, it is something that we can talk to you about though, because it's a legislative process, so there's no ex parte communication as far as this, because of that specific application. But the best way to record feedback is to be giving it to staff or in a public hearing. So if you have anything that you'd like to add or ask questions on or give any input to, please get with Ann or Melissa and or come to the next meeting. Once we have it on the agenda. Any other,
I have one silly thing that I'm just
I
gonna
love your silly things.
throw out there real quick, and maybe there's already something for this, but when we talk about maximum occupancy, is it also, or is there anywhere so far as horses, llama, I don't, like, that could potentially, I don't know,
So we
dogs,
say, I
pets.
think our code, like it says, one large animal per half acre is our ratio for animals.
It's not considered part of the same density requirements, so,
Okay,
so
but
the
they would
conditional
have
use
potentially
permit.
an impact based on water and waste and things
Oh,
of those.
absolutely. If we had a guest ranch that
Right,
came in, we would have to make sure they have domestic water, they would have to be, so we would be looking at health standards that CDPHE and the Department of Agriculture help us
okay,
set. So there are state regulations and guidelines that we can lean into if we ever had something.
so those
that wasn't-
domesticated animals
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily be included in any of those maximum occupancy numbers, it's separate but allows for it, okay.
Yeah, and it,
If that was an element that came in, that we would be diving in and looking at, what are the guidance that we would get from the state on those kind of things. We have some in our code, some information in our code, but then we'd also be looking at what are those state agencies that would help us review those kind of uses.
I can imagine a scenario where it could impact the number of people on the property based upon that.
yeah, which is why this all remains a conditional use permit, like it
Okay.
still has to be
Got
that
it.
we factor all of the pieces in this specific application. What it just does to me is I think that the conditional use permit already allows us to do that if an application comes and we don't make this change to the code, it still says that we could say, no, we're not gonna approve the application because they think it's 500 people's too many for that lot. But by adding this language, this additional language in there, I think it gives a little bit more clarity to an applicant and to planning staff and elected and things, is to just be like, this is the path though, like, these are the things you should be considering when deciding that, and so that you can condition density easier than just denying applications or vice versa, right? So I think it just helps say, well, we would determine your density based on what other impacts there are, whether it's
Okay,
on what your uses or neighboring uses are, or the steep hill on the back of your lot. Yeah. Cool.
Good question.
See, no solution.
No silly questions. Okay, well, thank you again for everybody, making it. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Unless you sounded like maybe you had something else you wanted to add. She's like, oh, we're going. Anybody have a motion to adjourn?
Edwards, motion to adjourn.
Okay, go.
a second.
All in favor?
Alright,
Thanks for sticking around, you guys. Sorry about the 2 minutes.